In this video, I'm going to run through some of the things that or some of the scripts I covered in the GroupShare Powershell Trilogy Part 2. So what we're looking at here is Total Commander. I've been through that in Part 1. If you don't know what this is, you can go back and take a look at that one, but it's basically just Windows Explorer on speed. So on the right, I've got all of my scripts, and these ones here that I'm selecting are the ones I discussed in the blog article. I'm not going to run through all of those, but I'll run through a couple, probably the add credentials and retrieve credentials, because this was a new concept that I introduced in the article, and then maybe I'll just take a look at the sample features, because that pretty much covers the things that are here, or most of the things, and plus a few things. So that might be quite helpful to give you an idea of how you can work with a PowerShell script and achieve quite a bit as a localization engineer or a project manager, or anybody who likes working with command line tools like PowerShell. So to begin with, let me just show you what I'm going to be covering. So this is the GroupShare instance that I'm going to be logged into. So dev server, in there I've created a user. This user is PS Trilogy. He only has access to the multifarious organization that I created in there, so he can't do anything else. And in that organization, so multifarious, we can see all the users that have got in here already. So you can see there's a bunch of users in there. We can see the resources here. I'm looking at project templates, so there's a bunch of project templates in there. There's a bunch of translation memories, all using sort of fairly similar names as I've been testing things. There's one project because I've cleared all the rest at some point or another. So what I'm going to do is I'll create resources and things as we're going along in here, and I'll use the name Trilogy in just about everything, because apart from this chap, who's actually me, this is who I'm logged in as at the moment. You can see that PS Trilogy. Apart from PS Trilogy, I haven't used that word anywhere else in here, so that should make it fairly easy for us to identify that the things that have been created with the scripts have all been created correctly. So with that, I'll come back to my Total Commander and I'll run the first script. So I'm same as I did before in part 1. I'm going to use Control-Shift-R, which is my auto hotkey script, to run the scripts based on the 32-bit or 64-bit, depending on what I'm doing, and just because it's convenient. And I'm going to add the credentials first of all, just to show you how that works. So we'll create a new credentials data set. I'll just pull this over a bit. So we're going to put it in this folder here. In fact, that's where it's going to go by default, because that's what the script does. So for the name, we'll call it the GroupShare Trilogy. We'll make up a URL for the GroupShare server, because obviously, well, not obviously, but I don't think there is one called groupsharetrilogy.com. Then we'll create the credentials object. So the user is going to be GroupShare Trilogy. That's the name that I'm going to give to him, and the password we'll use. There's no validation on this. You can put anything in there, but it's basically created it, and it's put it in this location, which is what you can see on the left. And as soon as I close this script, it should appear on the left there. So just keep your eye on this on the left. I close it, and there's the GroupShare Trilogy credentials. And if I open that in my text editor, because it's just an XML file, it looks like this, where you can see the dataset name is not encrypted, the username is not encrypted, but the password is. And this can only be decrypted on my computer, because I encrypted it in the first place on my computer, by somebody who knows the file is there and knows what to do with it in order to decrypt it. So if somehow I sent this file by mistake to somebody else, it would be useless to them. They wouldn't be able to use the password. So what I'll then do is I'll just run quickly the retrieve credentials, because I mentioned it in the blog article, a little simple script to show you that it worked. And if I open that one, you can see that when that comes up, it displays, when I pick the GroupShare Trilogy credentials file, it tells me exactly what I put in there. So it's decrypted it, and that's exactly what I typed in there. So that works, and the reason I showed you that is because fundamentally all of the other scripts that I'm going to be running, or the other script that I'll run, probably only one, use this idea of decrypting the authentication XML file, the encrypted XML file, in order to be able to log in, get the token from the GroupShare server, and then run all the scripts that I'm going to be running. So that's essentially how the credentials part works, which was new compared to the PowerShell Toolkit Part 1 that we did on Trilogy Studio. So we'll run this sample features script, which is essentially a copy of the sample round trip, which you can find in the GitHub site created by the Trilogy App Store team for the PowerShell Toolkit. I've taken that round trip, but then I've adapted it a bit because I didn't want it to be doing everything that it did, and I wanted it to be a little bit more specific to what I'm doing here. So you can see it's a little bit bigger than the sample round trip file itself, but it does basically the same thing. So Control-Shift-R to run the scripts again, or to select a script. I'll take the sample features and open it. First thing it does, it asks me which server I actually want to connect to, so I'm going to go to my dev server. You can then use those credentials in order to authenticate, which is done, get the token, and then use the token to be able to query the server using the API. And you can see by the fact that it's found it's found all 12 containers on that server. It's just listed the first 10 because that's what I told the script to do, that the authentication process has been successful. It's found 3,000 organizations, but we've only listed a maximum of 10, otherwise we'd be here quite a long time. As a localization engineer, these sorts of features are quite useful because you could, rather than have them displayed on screen, even though that could be quite helpful, you could send them to be written to a text file or an Excel file or something like that, which can be really helpful when you're carrying out maintenance, because you can get a really good overview of what's on the server in a written file where you can see everything in one go, and then you can go straight to the thing you need to go to carry out your maintenance without having to hunt around for it. So quite a useful feature. Now for the rest of the demo, I'm going to do it against the organization. So I'm just come back to here again, against the multifarious organization. So I'm going to type, I've lost it, what did I do? I'm going to type multifarious as the organization that I'm going to be working with. So multifarious, hit the enter key. It displays first of all the first 10 users in that organization, and if I hold up against here, we can see that looks about right. So the first one was Anna Reviewer, Gabriella Project Manager, George Trans, Multifarious, PowerShell, PS Trilogy, then 10, 11, 12, 13. That's the first 10. So that worked. So we know we're in the right place. So we'll create a new user for that list. So I'm going to call this user, I'm going to call them PS, so PowerShell, GroupShare, PowerShell GroupShare Trilogy 01. Okay, so that's the name of my user. The email address we'll use, and I'll go for PowerShell GroupShare .powershellh.com. So that's the email address, the made up email address that I'll use. So that should be at PowerShell.com. So totally made up. Password will also make up. That should pass the credentials, I think. Okay, so we created a new user called PSGS Trilogy 01. If I just flick over here to quickly and we refresh that screen, you see that 26 moved to 27. And if I scroll down the bottom, there's our new user, PSGS Trilogy 01. So we created a new user, as simple as that. We can create a new translation memory. So it's identified the first 10 translation memories. I think there's actually only 9 in there anyway. But if I go to my resources, my translation memories, there's the 9 translation memories, which is listed. And what we'll do is we'll create another one. So we'll call this the GroupShare Trilogy 01, in case I have to come back and do another one. GroupShare Trilogy 01 will be the name. The source language code, so ENGB. And then we want the target language codes. We'll use FIGs, so we'll create French, Italian, German, Spanish, so we can see how easy it is. So if when you're using command line, that's the French. Italian, Spanish, I missed that, German, figs. Okay, and hit the enter key. So that should now be creating it. It's created a translation memory called GS Trilogy 01. If I flick back over to here and we refresh that screen, there's our new translation memory. You can see there with all the translations languages that I asked it to create it. So that was pretty cool, pretty easy as well. It's quicker than going into GroupShare. Enter the name for a new project template. So we'll create a project template, which we will then use to create a project with. So we'll call this the GroupShare Trilogy template. One again, just in case I decide to give it another one. Okay, so it's created a project template, and if I just flick over to the templates, project templates, and we refresh that one, there's my new template, which if I look at it and we edit it, it should have inside it the GroupShare Trilogy translation memory that we just created. So that worked, so that's pretty cool. Or again, so much quicker than having to do this manually. So if you do this stuff a lot, it's really helpful. We'll now create a project using this template, and to do that I've got a small text file stored locally which the script is just going to pick up and use when it creates the project. So there's nothing flash about this. That's essentially just what we're going to do so we can see how it works. So the project name we'll call the GroupShare Trilogy Project 01. So that's my project name. It's now picking up the project creation, picking up a sample file which I created at this location, and it's created a new project using that project template, which is already done, and it'll be uploaded in a few moments. So if we go back to GroupShare, because the script is now complete, so I can close this, and if I go back to GroupShare and go to my projects, in fact it's there already, look at that, 1902. So that's the new one it's just created. There's my Trilogy project. You can see that it's working through the process with the file that I created in all 5 languages that are there. So pretty cool. All done entirely using the command line without having to go into GroupShare whatsoever. So gives you some idea of how it can be useful if you want to work with things like that. Maybe if we want to take a look at something else, we could take a look. Let's just take one look at the user properties, for example, so because that's quite a useful thing to do, to look up the properties of a particular user. So just one more script just to give you an idea of the sort of things that I looked at. So we look at the user properties on the dev server, and you could just type these as PowerShells. Once you've logged in one, that's enough. You could leave the window open and just type the PowerShell commands if you know what they are. So somebody who's very familiar with working with GroupShare would be able to do this without any aggravation whatsoever within one window, and they wouldn't have to keep selecting this and logging in, because once you're authenticated, you're authenticated. So I'm going to log in. So enter the username of the user in question. So we'll go back to our users, just make sure we pick one up. Let's pick the one we just picked up here. So let me just take his username, which is this. Cancel. Paste it in there. So that's the username. And you can see the information it gives back to me. It gives me back the unique ID, the name, the display name, description if it had been filled in, the email address, the locale, the organization ID, the user type they are, whether they're protected or not, and the roles that they've been set up as. So quite a useful feature, because again, for a busy engineer or someone who's maintaining the system, they can check things very quickly just using a PowerShell script and entering the command in order to be able to see what the details are of a particular user if they need to do something with them. So that's essentially it. It's all I'm going to show you in 15 minutes around how you work with the PowerShell toolkit for GroupShare. I hope you found it useful. I hope it gave you some ideas for things that you could do yourself. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the comments in the blog article, I'll be really interested to see if it's helpful for people and what they might decide to do with it.